I think we'll give it just a few minutes, see if some more people will jump on. But happy Friday. I got a few things that I want to cover, but any questions um, or anything that's going on with you guys that you want to talk about real quick while we wait for some people to jump on? Considering that Brianna and Julie are the ones that look at all the contracts and send them to me anyway, and Kenzie. See, so we're set. Good thing I'm going to record this one. We can send it out. All right.
Sorry, my daughter still has her name on it, and I need to have her get it off.
That's okay. You're the only one with video, so I know who you are. So
Okay, good.
everybody else, it could their names and pictures could be completely different than who they really are. So
That's
we'll
true.
we'll just assume that Julie and Kenzie and Brianna and Tracy are all the same.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Okay, so a couple things that I wanted to go through today. Every year they change some of the code of ethics stuff. And ever since they were created, they do some little changes here and there. In the last, this year, so in January, so just a couple weeks ago, they made some pretty significant changes on a couple of them. And so I wanted to go through the changes because what I find is that with the code of ethics, it's not a matter of do I purposely break them? It's just I'm not aware of them, and so they want us to do it a specific way. And so I'm going to go through some of those. You can go onto the division website and you can print off the ones that they're effective January 1st, 2026. And then Russ and I will most likely be teaching an ethics course. I think we're going to do the mandatory residential one next, and then we'll do a code of ethics course coming up so you can get the full version of it. But I'm just going to go through, I'm not going to go through the whole thing. That would completely bore all of you. So there's a couple of them that I'm just going to kind of read through and we can talk a little bit about them, some of the changes. As you are aware, the code of ethics is divided into really three categories. The first couple sections about dealing with your clients, the next sections dealing with agent between agent and agent, and then the last section is between agent and agent. So there's agents and customers, there's agent and the public, and then there's between agents. So a couple of the big changes. Section one, we we hear this every time we talk to anybody at the division. Section 1.12, when entering into a listing contract, realtors must advise sellers of. So there's a list of 5 things. They're on both the buyers and the seller side that we need to start disclosing up front. Um, First one is that one, we have to disclose that we are representing somebody. So even if you're having an open house and you represent the seller, you don't need to have a buyer's agency agreement to show the home, or even if it's not an open house, if a buyer calls up, they want to see your listing, you don't need to get an agreement with them to show that listing because you're actually representing your seller, but you are obligated to tell them that you are working with the seller. So and same as on the buying side. We won't go through the buying side as much either, but you just need to disclose who you're working with. Number two is the fact that broker compensation is not set by law and fully negotiable. In Utah, that's always been a thing, but just reiterating that over and over, the fact that it is negotiable. Um, I would just do that when you're doing your contracts. Three, the opinions and amount of compensation, if any, that may be offered to a sub-agent. Um, so there, you want to be able to tell them that they can't offer it. We've talked about this at length, so now it's in the code of ethics. So if you don't disclose this, or if you don't talk about that there's a chance you can compensate, that's how they can get you with the code of ethics. So really in this section, it's just disclose and communicate to who you're working with and that you're getting paid by whoever you're getting paid by. The last one is when acting as a listing broker or property manager, realtors shall not access or use or permit or enable others to access or use property on terms or conditions other than those established by the owner and seller. So this is one that we're seeing come up quite a bit where it's on the buying side too. The buying one is referenced in section 3, but basically what it's saying is there's a lot of agents who are starting to do a lot more social media. They're doing a lot more videos. So they're going into listings for the sole purpose of videoing the listing and put it on their feeds, and they have no buyers. Before we used to go in and preview properties all the time, which we can still preview properties. You just need to be really careful that if your intention is to film the property and do something with it on your social media, that's now really specific in the code of ethics that unless it's for the terms the seller has agreed to, you can't enter the property. It also applies to buyers. So if your buyer, if you look at our REPSI, it gives the buyer permission 2 times to go into the property. One is for the inspections before the due diligence period, and the next one is the final walkthrough. Other than that, after the due diligence period and before the walkthrough, there's no protection for the buyers or for the seller if a buyer is going in the property. So you really, as a listing agent, you really shouldn't be letting the buyers in the home after the due diligence and before their final walkthrough, which should be within the week of actually closing. So if you are letting them come in there and do like, oh, we want to measure, we want to see this. I mean, buyers are excited. They want to see the home. They want to show everybody the home. They're probably driving by the home multiple times. But our REPSI is only protecting you during the first part of the due diligence period. Once the due diligence over, then that's completed. And then you have the final walkthrough, which shouldn't be done before 7 days before the settlement. So just be really careful that it doesn't fall into this category that you're letting somebody come in the home to measure or do that if the seller is not aware of it and has not agreed to it. That's now part of really specific on the code of ethics. And if you have any questions about these, just unmute and ask because I don't want to really just read all the rules to you, but I've got like
Jason,
7 or 8 of them. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I was just trying to do that. So I don't do a lot of social media, but I feel like I really should. So if I or someone was doing it and they had the house, you're not even allowed to advertise it, are you? Or is that considered like, I don't know, like, do you have to take it off once it's sold or the listing agreement is over?
Yeah, so that's the reason that people are getting hit with it is they don't have permission from the seller to do anything with the property. And then once it's sold, agents are keeping it on their social media far past the time that it's been sold because they're still trying to use that as leverage for extra buyers. So that's where the problem is. I'm not going to say that you cannot do that. If you have permission from the seller and they're giving you written permission to do what you want with that, I think you can use that. You just have to be careful that if they don't give you permission. And that's what the ethics violation is saying is that the seller or the buyers don't know that you're doing what you're doing or for the extent it's not for the purpose of it. So the violation I'm seeing the most is when a buyer's agent goes into a listing, they don't tell you the property, so they're not like marketing somebody else's property because that would be another violation. You can't just randomly market somebody else's property without their permission, but they're giving you enough details. We had one in the grievance committee towards the end of last year where it was like a home builder flipper investor, and he would go into homes and he'd be like, let me show you what's wrong with this one. And then he would show certain things and say, this is wrong and this is wrong. And even though he didn't identify the property, all of us who are on the MLS and looking at properties, we can identify some of them quickly. So does that make sense,
Yeah.
Tracy?
Absolutely. I mean, I know that there's a rule that even when you're showing a house, which I have been guilty of, is where you're like, oh, this is a really cool wreath or bookcase, or, you think something's really cool in the property and you take a picture of it. And we're not supposed to do that either.
Yeah, I just be careful with it.
It's only
obviously,
personal, but
obviously, if you're
yeah,
taking a picture of it because you want to put one in your house, I don't know if anybody's going to catch that. But as far as putting on your social media and advertising things that from others' property, just be
yeah,
really careful with that because what they're going to cite in the your complaint is going to be this section 3. 3.9 is really what it is what they're going to cite. And if that came in to a grievance committee, you'll probably end up going to professional standards because it is pretty clear now that if the seller doesn't, if it's not the intent of what the seller is, it's going to be a violation. So,
right.
Can
Thank
see
you so
that.
much.
yep.
I can see why that, because I know I've been in a couple of homes, in initial meeting, and they have some really valuable paintings, and you definitely don't want that out in the public if there's some kind of a, risk there that way too.
Mhm.
So definitely that permission, I can see why that's so important.
Yeah, it is.
It
So,
totally makes sense. It's just, I think some people really are on the border of not being right. You know what I mean? Misusing it. So,
misusing it. Yeah. And
yeah,
that's why we have the code of ethics. But I can tell you that if you go through the code of ethics, all of us have probably done something in there that we're like, oh, I probably shouldn't have done that. So it's not
right.
like it's like, oh, you're a bad person. It's just be aware of it because you don't want to have to defend yourself if you're doing it. Just everything has to be disclosed. Everything has to be uh, not deceived. It has to be the intent of what you're doing is what it is. That goes into other ones in here that they've
Jason,
updated. Yes,
can I just ask one question just to clarify?
sure.
So when the buyers come through, they look at the home, they do their offer, they do their due diligence, then we should not be letting them in the home again until um the final walkthrough.
Okay, so yes, but I'm gonna explain that a little bit more because if you just take the approach of nope, you already the due diligence over, I'm not going to walk through it. It's going to come across to the buyer as what's the seller doing? We're not, they're keeping us out of the home and all of that. The Rep C specifically allows for the seller to give permission to the buyer to come in and do inspections. Those inspections need to be done by the due diligence period. So after that, and it specifically says in the Rep C that if there's any damage that's done because of the inspections during the due diligence period, it's the responsibility of the buyer. So once you pass the due diligence period, the permission for them to just come and go when they please is no longer written into our contract. So I'm not saying let's be strict agents and be like, hey, no, you can never come into my home. But I've had sellers call up and say this is out of control. They want to come in every single day. They want to come in multiple times a week. They want to keep doing tests and they're saying that the due diligence is over, but they still want to do other tests. As a seller, you have the right to say no. Now, you have to decide as an agent if that makes sense for this deal or what really is going on. So you don't, one, create a problem where there's not a problem there, which unfortunately as agents, we actually create a lot more problems because of either our ego or we want to show that we're doing something than is necessary. So when I say it's not protecting it. The contract is saying, I don't have to let you in there anymore. You just have to decide whether or not that makes sense.
So if we text the, listing agent, or with a buyer and say they forgot to do one thing, they wanted to check one thing, and we text the listing agent, is it okay if we go in? And then the agent gets back and says, yes, my seller says that is okay. Does that count? Does that document that?
Yeah, yeah, that would be fine. If the seller's given you permission to do that, I mean, that's that this is more in alignment with the seller doesn't want to let people go in over and over and over and over. Agents are abusing, or not agents, I would say the buyers, they're excited about it. They're taking advantage of that going over and over and over. This is a protection for the seller. It says once the due diligence period's over, there's nothing in the contract that says I need to let you into my home anymore until, and it specifically says the final walkthrough, I have to allow them to do a final walkthrough. So I can't prevent them from doing a final walkthrough before we settle, but that has a specific deadline on it. It says 7 days before settlement. So if I'm 2 weeks out before settlement and they're wanting to come in the home, as an agent, I can't just let them in. I need to talk to the seller and get permission from them that says you're okay with this. And if they come back and say I'm not okay with it, the buyer needs to follow that. Okay, so that this is where agents get in trouble is it's a vacant home, and after due diligence period, I'm just using the key box. I'm letting people in. If the seller comes back and says, I never gave you permission to come in my home, and they file an ethics complaint against you as a buyer's agent because you used the key box during that time, due diligence period, and the final walkthrough, if you use the key box during that time without permission, you're going to have the violation. Jeanette, did that answer your question?
It did. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. 3.3 or 3.1, it now specifically says there is no compensation unless expressly indicated in the offer or a cooperation agreement. So if you forget to put it in the REPC and you forget to put it in a cooperation agreement with the other brokerage and they refuse to pay you, and you ruin the deal, pull out of the deal, and the seller comes back and says you killed the deal because you didn't have you weren't getting paid, that could fall under this. So just make sure that if you want the seller to pay you, that you need to have that negotiated with your offer or right before your offer is accepted. Article 4 is updated, and it's talking. Article 4 talks about who representing yourself. So you have ownership in it. There's 4 things that have ownership. This is what one of them's changed. One is you have to disclose that you have personal ownership, so you represent themselves. 2, you represent a member of their immediate family. So this was more unclear before, of like my cousin is buying a home. Do I need to disclose my interest in it? My uncle, my aunt. This is talking specifically about immediate family. If it's immediate family that's involved, you need to make sure you disclose that before you go under contract. Represent the firm or a brokerage of that agent. And then represent an entity in which the realtor or member of their immediate family has legal interest. Okay, so this is one that I see most, is when I have an ownership in an LLC, even if it's just a minor 5% ownership, I still have to disclose it, and I still can't represent buyers and sell. I can't do a dual agency, limit agency, if I have any ownership whatsoever in it. Article 7 changed. It says, in a transaction, realtors shall not accept compensation from more than one party, even if permitted by law, without disclosure. So if you're getting paid 2 different ways in a transaction, that needs to be disclosed to the buyer and the seller, or basically your client. Okay.
Does that mean if you're double siding, or is that some other way? How else would you get paid?
Yes, yeah. If you're getting paid for some other service within it, so compensation from a third party person, like I'm gonna do a staging and they're paying me a kickback, or I'm doing some lending stuff or something in there, or the buyer's going to pay me, and then the seller's going to pay the remaining amount. Just make sure you disclose to them that, hey, I'm getting paid by you here, and then the remaining of the amount is getting paid by the seller. So there's two things getting paid there. So you just want to make sure you disclose that.
And what if I had a builder quite a few years ago, like give me an iPad? Should we disclose items like that as well, of value?
Yes, yeah, to your client that you're getting that. Yeah.
Okay.
Don't don't get paid or incentivized under the table. Is basically what it looks like is I didn't know they were getting this, and then you get it. It would be better to face that up front than they come back and be like, "Well, I paid you and you got the iPad," or um, whatever it ends up being. So just disclose it is basically when everyone in the transaction knows what's happening, then there's not usually an ethics violation. It's usually one person who doesn't know what's happening. It doesn't matter whether it's inspection issues or commission issues or any of those. When somebody doesn't know what's going on, it's usually that person who files the ethics complaint. And then it comes down to us saying, should they have known and should you have told them that happened? So you just want to make sure that happens. Okay, the last
Not to
one I'm
beat
going
a
to go.
dead horse, but I need to understand this because I'm
Mhm.
actually double siding one. When we double side though, we ask for that commission in the rep C. Do we have to let that buyer know that the seller's paying us too? Or is that just like understood, like we're the listing agent?
Yeah, so it's disclosed in the rep C, right?
Well, in the rep C, we're just asking that the seller pay us for the buyer, but nothing's disclosed saying the seller's paying us for the seller. That's where I'm confused. Does that make
Oh,
sense?
okay. So you represent, so you're doing a limited agency, you represent the
Right.
buyer and you represent the seller
And
and
I
the
did the limited agency agreement,
Mhm.
but
Okay.
do,
So in
go
your
ahead.
limited agency agreement, it talks about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so okay, perfect.
Yeah. So yeah, so it's really when the way that it's written here is basically just if you're getting compensated in, you can get compensated in multiple ways. You just need to make sure that everyone knows. So if I'm getting compensated by two different parties, they need to know. Well, the REPSI will explain it. My limited agency will explain it. But other than those, there's really no documents going back and forth and just saying, hey, just so you know, I'm representing the seller as well in that. So does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Okay, so this is a big one, Article 10. This is one that kind of gone back and forth. So in 2020, a lot of things were happening with hate and frustration in the world. And so the NAR came out with a really strict, um, you cannot discriminate in any form whatsoever. And then like they just blanketed the whole thing of just like if you say anything anywhere at any time whatsoever, you can be in violation of this, which is what they're trying to addend here. So there's two sections that I want to go through. One is when involved, this is 10.1, when involved in a sale or lease of a residence, realtors shall not volunteer information regarding a race, religion, or ethnic composition of any neighborhood. However, realtors may provide other demographic information. Realtors shall not engage in any activities which may result in panic selling or steering. So this is basically when your clients, because most of them are going to ask you questions that kind of fall into this area about racial things, religious things, um, any ethnic composition of this neighborhood. By you engaging in that kind of a conversation, you're going to be running into steering and panic sells. So if I'm doing anything that discourages people from going to a certain area, we got to be really careful with that. Um, so if somebody asks you, is there a lot of Hispanics in this neighborhood? As an agent, I don't want you to answer that question. You can point them in a direction that says, hey, you're welcome to go look at, the city. You can drive around. Um, you know, just be really careful with that. The other one is, you know, is there a church in here? Is there, what kind of churches are around here? Those are things that as agents, I just want you to be really careful with presenting that information. You don't have to be like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't tell you that. point them in the right direction. Just say, hey, if this is important to you, here's some websites you can look at. And as agents, we should find those and find out how to give information so that they can be educated if that's important to them, but not coming from us. The last one on that section that they've changed is 10.5. It says realtors in their capacity as real estate professionals in association with their real estate business or in real estate related activities shall not harass any person or persons based on race, color, religion, sex, disability, familial status, national origin, sexual orientation, or gender identity. As used in the Code of Ethics, harassment is unwelcome behavior directed at an individual or group based on one or more of the above protected characteristics, where the purpose of or effect of the behavior is to create a hostile, abusive, or intimidating environment which adversely affects their abilities to access equal professional service or employment opportunities. Okay, so this is where they got really specific, and I'm gonna tell you how the ethics is, and then I'm gonna kind of tell you how our company is, because they're a little bit different on this, based off of some conversations that we've had recently. So the NAR has come back with the ethics, and they're saying that when you're acting in the capacity as a real estate agent, professional, in your business, when you're acting in that capacity, then none of that stuff you cannot put any of that stuff in your business if you're acting as an agent. Okay, so what happened was in the NAR, people would go on their personal Instagrams or personal social medias, and they would post content that was not necessarily appropriate for a real estate agent, and they're basically expressing their opinions that are very strong opinions about other things. Okay, so before that was a violation of the ethics code. Now they're getting really specific, and they're saying that if it's related to your business, Facebook, and all of that, they're going to look at that as the ethics violation. Okay, so that's what the rule has changed to. As a company, though, we've talked about it, and doesn't matter where you post your information, if it reflects poorly on us as an organization, we are not going to stand for that. So even if you're posting on your personal site and you're doing some of these harassment things that we just talked about here, and it comes back as an organization, then I'll send Kenzie on you. Actually, Russ and I will deal with that. So you just want to make sure that the ethics violation specifically has to do with your real estate business, but as a company, we're a little bit more harsh than just the ethic one, because what we found is that when it does affect us as an organization, we hope that you guys represent us well. And I know most of you do. We've had a few recently that have not, and we've talked with them, and we've fixed it. So hopefully that makes sense. Any questions on that? Okay, so there's a few other smaller changes, but I'm not going to go over them today. I think we've talked enough rules for once, but really, when it comes down to it, be familiar with what you can and can't do. Disclose when you need to disclose, and treat people respectfully, and you're not going to have any problem with that. And if you have questions, reach out. We're more than happy to help. So hopefully that was helpful for you. Any questions about those, or any other thing that you want to ask me before we jump off today?
I have a question about what I can and can't do.
Okay.
So I sold a property like in 2018, and that property's been sold a couple times since. But I just had the agent, I don't know if she's the buyer's agent, I think she's a listing agent on it, selling it. And she's asking me for a lot of information about, it was a flip. So I have the information about the city approving the inspector and stuff, and the roof and stuff. But and she wants me to send her that information, and I'm not sure if I should do that or not. I don't know why she's reaching out to me.
Does she know you have that information? I mean, that seems odd that she would know that.
Well,
But
she would know that just because I sold the home. But I didn't, she wasn't the agent, but, I don't know if seemed to know I have that information. I haven't really
yeah.
responded, so.
So when it comes to giving out information, what you have to ask yourself is, does this information in any way whatsoever give out personal information for a client that I've worked with? You don't want to be giving out personal information. You don't want to be giving out things that you don't have permission to do. So being that you've already sold it, there's most information I would say we're not giving out. We don't want to give out all the information that they need should be already disclosed on the MLS, so we shouldn't really need to disclose too much of that. But it all depends on what she's asking and if it's private information. If it's private information, I wouldn't give it.
Well, it's like this, so when they flipped it, they had to have the city inspector come out and approve it. And so it's a city inspection report that I have, but it's also at the city. So she wants that, and then she wanted information about the roof that I didn't have, like what kind of roof it is. I don't know anything about that. But I was just wasn't comfortable if I should share that or not. Because it does have my buyer, the person who sold it has their name on it.
Yeah, and one of them paid for it, correct?
What's that?
One of the clients paid for it when you did it?
Yeah. Well, the seller, so I was representing the seller. And he,
You're representing the seller and the buyer paid to have that inspected.
no, it was when the seller was building the home, he got permits
Mhm.
to flip it. And so when he did the flipping, then the city inspector came out and passed everything off that he did. So it's just a report from the city inspector saying this is okay, this is good. And so I do have that report. And I shared it with the original buyer because it was part of the contract. But that was 7 years ago. This agent didn't have anything to do with that transaction. But now she's selling the home and she's asking me for information. And I don't understand that. But I also don't want to give her anything that I'm not supposed to. So
Yeah,
Can I
I'm really
interject
careful.
a question kind of comment to this?
Okay.
Just because from the standpoint of coming into it with a new, whether you're seller or buyer, trying to do your due diligence to make sure you have correct information, I can see why someone might ask for that if, maybe it's that they're directed to the county records, which have that information. But I can see how might want that information to make sure that I'm disclosing the things in my due diligence that I need to disclose. But so I guess coming from the other side of it, not from Jeanette's side, but someone else who's selling, and you might, because I've had other agents in the past be very helpful in getting, like when I had a buyer but I couldn't get any information and I felt like there was more that needed to be disclosed or whatever. And you could see who, where it was past sold, it was really helpful. So I can see both sides. You don't want to do anything that would make sure that you're not disclosing any information that potentially is a breach of contract. But you also want to make sure that you are trying to get the information that you need to make a really, your due diligence on that side of it too. Does that make sense?
Mhm. Yeah.
I
And I think you're spot on. I mean, the hard part as agents is, when we play the role of, I'm not going to help you,
Right.
that's not helpful either. I mean, we're here to help each other. But when it's private information, like the one with the city, the permits, we should really just direct them to the city. I mean, that's 7 years ago. That's a long time to be sending over information on that. But you could also reach out to your client who was there and just say, "Are you okay?" There's asking for it if you're still in contact.
Okay. Yeah,
If
I don't know why
you're
she
okay
doesn't
with
just
that.
go to the city, but maybe it's just easier to come to me. I don't know.
Well, and I think what Chris was saying is absolutely right. I mean, as an agent, we're trying to find the fastest way to get the information. And so if I'm going to call the other agent, I'm just hoping they got information, they can give it to me. And if, if you didn't have that information, they'd be like, okay, they didn't have the information, we're going to go on. But the fact that you have the information, that's why you're asking this question is, can I give them information? Well, the problem is this all pertains to a specific client. Any information out of there is possibly looking at your fiduciary duties,
Right.
confidentiality. If that seller doesn't want you to give out the city report, that's a problem. So for me, I don't like to look at it and say, what is this information that they're asking for? Is it public information? And if it is, then I might just help them out and give them the information because it's public information. They're going to find it anyway. Or if it's not public information, then I might have to go back to my client and say, hey, these guys are asking for it. Do you have any issues with me sending it to them? If they say, no, that's fine, I just get that in writing from them that says, no, that's fine. And then I would send it to them. So I wouldn't just, here's all my stuff just because you asked me. And
Right.
I think what Chris was saying was just fine as far as that you can ask. I mean, when I list a property or I'm working with somebody I'm putting an offer in, I ask all the questions they shouldn't answer just in case they answer it.
Yeah. So really, a city inspection would be public information, but I'll probably still reach out to my client and let them know what's happening.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that sounds great.
Yeah, I just think it's weird that she's coming to me. Maybe that's normal. I don't know.
Hey, Jason, I have
Yeah.
a follow-up question. Didn't we have
Uh-huh.
abrogation in the REPSI back then?
For when?
Once the contract is complete and closing has happened, then abrogation and then you're not responsible and your duties, your fiduciary duties have ended.
Okay, so when just because your contract's ended doesn't mean your fiduciary duties are done. Okay, so I don't have the responsibilities as the same, but like confidentiality. Okay, just because it's closed and now I'm done with that doesn't mean I can go out and say, oh, you should have seen what this transaction did, and this is what my client did, and this is like there's an element of keeping everything in the transaction. You don't, so as far as are you responsible to do, you won't be obedient and do all of the things and show them homes because you're no longer their agent. You don't have those same duties, but while you were their agent, that information stays with that transaction. So if we get this all the time, people will call up the office and they'll say, hey, I want to look at this transaction, or can I look at the contract for this? And unless it's the party of that contract, we're not going to give it to you. And so the courts, they have to actually subpoena all the information from us. So we get a court order that says you need to send us all this information that you have regarding this. That we have to do. But if they don't have that, I don't want to tell them. So in that particular case, even though I don't represent them anymore, I still have information that I cannot use because of the relationship that I had during that time, if that makes sense.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Just as a follow-up to it, if a client's daughter comes to me and says, hey, you did this deal with my parents and it cut me out of their will effectively. And then at that point, I'm not really still free to talk openly with the daughter because I still effectively have that transaction and what happened in that transaction under confidentiality to my client in effect, even though it's closed.
Yes.
Got it.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Don't bring up information, especially to the daughter that got cut out of the will. Nope, that's you coming back into the transaction, even though it's closed. So any information you have in the transaction needs to stay between the buyer and the seller once it's closed, unless our contracts specifically say we will disclose this information to the MLS. That gives us permission from the seller or the buyer to disclose this to the MLS. That's the only reason we do that. Other than that, we should not be disclosing anything. And somebody who's asking those type of questions after the fact, I can tell you that they're looking for something And if it goes the direction they want it to versus the seller or the buyer, that buyer or seller is going to come back after you.
Good insight. Thanks.
Yep, no problem. Okay, any other questions? All right, fantastic. Have a great weekend. Monday we are closed as an office, but your key cards still work, and we'll be back here on Tuesday. But reach out anytime with questions. Just call us, and we'll be available for you. Have a great
Thank
weekend.
you. Have a good
Thanks,
weekend.
Jason.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.